Good evening. Back to rugby and serious fraud. I want to talk about the globalised game.
Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, the land of legend, the land of the Maori. Since Polynesians first came here 1,000 years ago, the tradition of storytelling has kept their legends alive. New Zealand was discovered by Europeans in 1642.
The Cooks, I'm related to them, and they helped us get out of New Zealand when we were just having real trouble selling our house in time, when I got booted out on that Agent Orange issue that I talked about the other day. These are some of the lovely beaches that we were able to visit with my family when I was able to get a job in New Zealand. And I want to show you the cushy little number that is the job of being a rugby coach or a rugby diplomat or even a spin doctor for Tony Blair. You get to go on these junkets and you get to asset strip the whole of the great game that we used to be really uppity about when there was an apartheid regime in the Republic of South Africa, trading nuclear weapons and killing our diplomats. Oh no, that was us that killed our own diplomats. But the apartheid regime raised massive protests from academics in New Zealand that I've worked with, and I've made extensive videos on folk like Dr. Jones that's at the head of the globalised companies, and I've explained to you how Rangers' cash and assets are in Dunedin in David Murray's private trust funds that are strictly inaccessible for tax reasons. Right then, let me read you out some of the delegates that are on this trip, and then I'll show you some of their director details right at the top of the coaching food chain. That's Sir Ian McGeechan, if they didn't crash my computer before I get that far. Let's just scan through it really quickly so I can show you how many fucking what we used to call alacadoos at Kelso Rugby Club. That was in the days when Kelso Rugby Club had 5 teams and a semi-junior team too, you know, a Colts team, and we won the tournament almost every year we participated in it. And then the coaches began to professionalise their business. The school teachers had to get certified for health and safety reasons so that they could come and pass on the skills that we got for nothing. And now, if somebody has an accident, even although everybody pays massive fees into the clubs and into the rugby unions that run the clubs and profit from them and allow the alacadoos to get the junkets, there is no money left to save the man that's in the ITU with a broken back. You have to run a raffle for that, which we were participating in yesterday for a schoolboy in an incident that occurred sadly in Scottish rugby. The man has to get the help from the fans that fund the game, that allow them to go on junkets to every continent, every close season, and play meaningless friendlies, when the second team now cannot afford to run a bus. It is tragic. It's all pre-planned, and I want to read you the list of delegates on the management of the party that was involved there. I've got a wee booklet because they sell things called merchandise. Every initiative now. This one's called Inside the Lions Den, the New Zealand 2005 tour, an official Lions DVD. They may well take this video down because I'm making it in my own living room, but it has a very hefty copyright warning that their blindside flanker will get at me if I attempt to reproduce it for profit. This is totally amateur, like everything I do, but the professional style insight that it will give you into how they steal from the fans as they privatise the game, make it professional, and sweep all around the world at the turnstile's expense. Right, here we go. That man broke his leg. I forget what his name is. Even my wife didn't like him because he used to be vicious against women, and they scammed him into an interview that made him look like a sexist. I can't remember his name. Lawrence Delaglio, I think. Used to play for Wasps. I played against them. They were really good. And I saw a doctor that was trained in being a genuine doctor. When somebody had a cardiovascular accident in the grandstand and doctors still had time to train to be doctors, that doctor, who was a Scottish captain, he played on the flank, and in due course I will remember his name, Wainwright was his name. He went off the pitch at the Wasps ground, treated a man with a cardiovascular accident, and then went back into the scrum. Everybody was uplifted by that experience. That was when the game was amateur, and they had enough time in the university sector to train on and play on a Wednesday, and they did not have a £9,000 fee imposed on them like all of the poor children that go to English universities now. Rob Wainwright, if you could rise up again on behalf of the decent people and get folk like the fullback for Wales, JPR Williams, also a medical student, played on the flank on a Wednesday, the greatest fullback that Wales ever played. He played on the flank to harden up his game as an amateur, and he's putting the rest of his life into medicine. Yeah, like Wainwright. They've got a career ahead of them. They do not have to clamour around the touring parties and become alacadoos in greatcoats like Bill Beaumont and his friends. Let me read out the list. It's pathetic. I'm going to try and get the thing scanning through so that I don't bore you to tears with a little brochure and the pamphlet. Let's see if I can get it moving fast. There we go. At least we've got the tide coming in now. Oh no. Play. Fast forward. No, it's not going to go on. Oh, here we go. Look at that.
26th.
There we go.
A week of preparation in Wales. The squad heads to New Zealand. But for the Liverpool fans among them, there's a small match of the Champions League final to focus on.
We keep mentioning Liverpool in the training of fascists, in the ambulance sector accidents and all the inquests that then ensue year after year when they have to revitalise that old news to cover their financial crimes. Okay, we're now flitting through it. My dad kent folk that were on a pension in Kelsey. They went there to follow the Lions round the country. They spent £13,000 on the trip. All of them went in little caravans, little independent holiday homes that you have to park up and you have to pay for relatively cheaply, but it is a massive event. It excites the whole of the infantile world, and all these guys talk it up as if it's World War III. They actually injure the captain of the Lions in the first game so that they then fall apart and they pretend that there is a rift between the players. The players then renege on their public speaking commitments, their commitments to visit the Kiwi hospitals, and their commitment to be diplomats, as they are highly paid. I don't reckon how much these guys get. I'm led to believe that the Scotland professionals get £200,000 a year now. This is even higher up the game than that. Okay, and it is completely meaningless. Now they tour the world every year in the close season at the ordinary club's expense. It is a blood-sucking exercise par excellence. Here are the list of managers. Sir Clive Woodward, head coach. He had a go at profiteering in football management after he'd won the World Cup with Mike Tyndall, the man that married the princess to cover up the Tyndall Air Base in the bombings of the Twin Towers. The Tyndall Air Base is in Florida. They were deployed on the day, like the Canadian Air Force, on a practice drill like they did in 7/7 when they bombed the railway stations in London, and the suicide bombers that were supposed to have bombed the trains missed their train for Birmingham, so they had to be shot in Canary Wharf instead. If the whole thing is not a false news flag to take your attention off the financial crimes like these professional rugby players are guilty of. So Sir Clive Woodward, head coach; Bill Beaumont, OBE, tour manager; Eddie O'Sullivan, coach; Andy Robinson, OBE, coach; Ian McGeechan, OBE, coach. He's now Sir Ian. I've got his directorships all lined up to shock you with. Then we've got Mike Ford, coach; Dave Allred, MBE, coach; John Feehan, chief executive; Louise Ramsey, MBE, team manager; Dave Redden, MBE, fitness coach; Craig White, oh, that couldn't be the Rangers thief having a wee visit to David Murray's headquarters, could it? It might be, but it says he's the fitness coach. Tony Biscombe, video analyst; Gavin Scott, video analyst; James Robson, he's related to the banking dynasty, I'm led to believe. He is the head doctor. Gary O'Driscoll, doctor. Phil Pask, physiotherapist. Bob Stewart, physiotherapist masseur. Stuart Barton, physiotherapist masseur. Richard Wegrisk, masseur. Dave Campbell, shh, it says chef. I thought it was chief, but it says chef. Okay, so that's to prevent poisoning in peacetime, in friendly matches that are absolutely meaningless, that get folk all riled up and are prepared to spend 13 grand of their savings when their pensions are fucking busted by the corrupted governments. And wait till you get to the bottom of the list. Dave Tennyson, kit technician. Dave Pearson, kit assistant. Louisa Cheetham, media manager. David McHugh, specialist advisor. Richard Smith, legal support. Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's spin doctor. The year after we engage in the war in Iraq, media consultant. Ben Wilson, media assistant. Marcus Jansa, media assistant. Do you get the picture? When you see them walk onto the ancient pitch that is absolutely decrepit. We've been in the dressing rooms at the House of Pain. They are very, very shoddy. The New Zealand Rugby Union must be desperately short of cash, and they now engage in reciprocal visits to England. And Richie McCaw gave away a try last night that could well become a conspiracy theory, but the All Blacks managed to keep their record, their peerless record against Scotland, intact. Scotland have only managed to draw with them once, when Ian McGeechan was in a position very, very soon to give them a bribe. I'll describe what he does in his business interests in a few minutes. But we're flitting it through it, and I would like to be able to try and stop it at some of their coaching meetings. It's as if they're in World War III and they take it deadly seriously. There you see the training coach showing them how to keep fit. They've all got specialist kit for it. They've all got this is the bit, I think.
The Lions have timetabled a variety of community events into their schedule. It's a chance to meet and greet the people of New Zealand.
Who's your favourite player?
I have no clue, I just like watching.
A children's ward, a junior rugby tournament, a physio rehabilitation unit, all part of the Lions experience.
So when the Kiwi captain ditched Brian O'Driscoll down on the neck and injured him, they then stopped these engagements. They went on the sulk. They refused to meet their commitments in the social life sector, and they went on the golf course instead, as you'll see in due course. Right then, that's enough of the tour for the moment. Did you realise that the man that I mentioned as Tony Blair's spin doctor, I keep forgetting his name, and let me just show you another tour in an earlier era, the Mighty Lions, and let me show you a picture of how the propaganda is manipulated. There's a man that I admired when I was playing. His name's Sandy Carmichael. He played prop against the All Blacks in Christchurch, which was the victim of a massive earthquake the year we left. Within the week that the Trans-Pacific Trade Delegation visited Christchurch, it was on the very day that the Trans-Pacific Trade Delegation visited Christchurch that they had the first of those massive quakes. They had thousands of earthquakes, and the stadium that they had been building throughout all of our stay in New Zealand was completely useless when the World Cup started the following year, or a couple of years later, 2009. I think it was the same year as the World Cup started that they had the quake, and that stadium was never used in the end, like the stadia in Chile when Pinochet trained in Bolivia and returned to Chile the year the World Cup was hosted there. That's the FIBA World Cup. Okay, so here they are playing matches. They beat the provincial sides, and they struggle against the national side. It's become traditional. When the amateurs were playing, and the Welsh guys were really good amateurs, they could dance rings round the All Blacks. And that was the period when they had almost done away with the apartheid stuff, and it was really good to watch, and there was nae political involvement. There were nae spin doctors sucking the money out the game. That man that is the spin doctor and is on the tour, I think that they will strongly deny it, but the man that runs Company Check, which I'm going to show you now, is the CEO at Company Check is what was the name of the man? Alistair Campbell. There you go. He's disappeared out the spin doctoring sector for shame, and his mates in that sector are guilty of war crimes. They're pretending that they are on rehab, and let me show you what McGeechan does. This is a little video that we made the other day, and I'll just remind you that the leader of this delegation, or the more recent delegation to Australia, just a year or so ago, 18 months back, was Andy Irvine. And this is a little bit on Andy Irvine and his involvement as the head of the party to Australia.
And evil human behaviours, if you react aggressively against it, this is what Andy Irvine has registered in his... Andy Irvine was a childhood hero of mine. My Auntie Mary told me that he was going to be one of the world greats, and our Kelso hero, George Fairbairn, who ended up in the rugby league world as a world hero, was displaced from rugby union by Andrew Irvine because he was the incumbent of the full-back position in the rugby pitch. The reason he's now in favour with the administrators in the game is because he's become a magnet in the financial services sector. He's registered at where have we got? He's registered at Throgmorton Avenue, London, United Kingdom, EC2 2DL. Short name Andrew Irvine, year of birth 1950.
So if you've missed that, you can find it on Julian Callum Lamont, 3 of 3, Scottish Rugby, British Lions President at the British Legion, or sorry, Scottish Rugby, British Lions, President at the British Legion, and there's an extension to that title which there's no space for. So that was produced several days ago. You can find it on my YouTube channel, which is Kelsonian Smithsonian. Okay? Now, let me show you what Ian McGeechan does. Ian McGeechan, I believe, is now Sir Ian McGeechan. That confirms that. This is his interlocks, and it lists the companies that he's involved with or has been involved with. Active since 2012. Rugby Coaches Association. The game is now globalised. This bastard is a Leeds Freemason. When we were revealing what goes on in the epicentre for the fraud in the Leeds Freemasonry sector at One Park Row, they were setting fire to the adjacent buildings on the BBC News in the morning. It's easy to see the motives for it. Then they sent you into Rochdale, where Lord Markham of Ukraine is registered as a director with all the other guys in his family at Crown Oil. And I've made videos on the calls that we made to the call centre in Crown Oil, confirming that they have no product. They have no insight into which international country their oil comes from. It is a fraud. They only have coupons. McGeechan at least has a few tracksuits. They get them for free. All of them from Adidas, with their dubious interests in bribes and fraud accusations in the past. Rugby Coaches Association. I want to read out the other names because I didn't ken whether or not they are well known. If I see a well known one, I'll reel it off. Lindley, Delaney, Davies, Moon, Professor David John Collins, academics, and Sir Ian himself lived down in the West Country. He was coaching, I can't remember whether it was Bath or Cornwall, but he was right down next to Camilla's royal estate in Cornwall. Around about the time, I think he was probably out of there for reputational reasons before they incurred the massive West Country floods. It's quite close to Tavistock, where they trained the Liverpool people like Hitler and Stalin, and all of this is just a continuation of the raping and pillaging of a once great amateur game. JPR Williams and those guys that came out the grandstand to fix people for free were magnificent characters in an amateur game. All of it has been twisted within McGeechan's lifetime in the game. We mentioned Jim Telfer, Creamy Telfer. I believe that he has been an amateur for most of his life, and I now know that he dedicates a lot of his time to the amateurs that are the youth teams in Melrose. I have a lot of time for him. He was limping badly the last time I saw him, but I hope he recovers from that, because he puts time into the amateur game at the bottom of the game. McGeechan's sucking the cash out all through every level of the game, as you'll find it as we go through this list. Kevin Peter Mitchell, Global Sports Coaching Limited. You remember what I told you about the Australian that had the cardiovascular accident? The boss at Saracens, played for Saracens for a long time, into financial services, then into the ITU, and then out of the public eye entirely when you get no news of them. That was Michael Lina, by the way. Previous directors and secretaries, these are relatively anonymous names for me. Lady Judith Irene McGeechan gets a piece of the action at 2 current or dissolved companies, along with the 8 that he has run. This one is a massive fraud. UK PLC Client Director Limited. Now, I've been to UK PLC. It links the SRU's patroness, Anne Lawrence. That's Princess Anne Lawrence, mother-in-law of Mike Tyndall. For shame for the cover-up in the Tyndall Airbase involvement, and it ties them into academics at the University of Reading and people who are the sisters of the people that were in the birthing chamber at RAF Halton when we had our first child. They are running Ponzi schemes in what is a University of Reading that has a massive campus. I've been interviewed there. I was likely to get a job at the University of Bradford, but for the insightful feedback I gave them to the pharmacy school at Reading. I got attacked overnight before the appointment decision was made, and I was sent back to New Zealand jobless. The people at Bradford will no longer talk to me because they know that I'm innocent, and a lot of my talk was on spirited people in rugby and the parallels for small universities like Bradford and the need to be spirited in your performance in research and your fundraising efforts. UK PLC are just Ponzi scheme thieves. The Ponzis are massive. In the neuroscience sector at Reading, there are 2 employees. None of them are neuroscientists. Both of them are financial criminals. You've heard me talk about the spoken wheel model. The spoken wheel model is typified by the links of Princess Anne to the directors and the secretaries at UK PLC. It takes you from the monarchy to low-life people that are just doing their job and just happen to be West Country people out of Bristol, or just happen to be born within range of 1 Park Row, Leeds. Yeah? Or to be in the Liverpool boiler rooms that Gordon Bowden and I have denounced widely as being deployed by Mrs. Thatcher before Tony Blair, the socialist, began to asset strip our country and to brutalise countries overseas, and then to send his spin doctor to diplomatically steal from the global game that is rugby and take the money right to the top of that game, only accessible by the Alakadoos. Not any of it is accessible to the second team. The vast hordes of replacements that now sit on the bench for boredom because these guys are intent on dismembering the fitness, the capability and the sovereignty and governance of the game. Let's keep going down. He's only got 8. Shouldn't have taken too long. Leeds Rugby Union Football Club Limited. It's also a rugby league club. It has had New Zealand Kiwi greats playing for it. Marshall I was a fan of Marshall's. I fished frequently on the river that runs through his hometown. It was called the Matara River, and it was the town of Matara, I think. They had massive agricultural plants there, as we've described, for the agricultural interests in the Scottish borders. That man was a bit free-spirited for their liking. He used to get censured, he used to get talked to by the officials in the game because he liked a good night out, he liked to throw his fists around, and he was loud, like some other scrum halves that I know that lost their teeth on the Heriots pitch. Justin Marshall was one of the world greats. He played for Leeds, and I know that Kelso people have come from Leeds to play up here, and they still are retained by the club. It's an invaluable linkage, but the professionalisation of the game is a disaster for the game globally. Unless you're right up in the upper echelons or in a great coat like Bill Beaumont, Dr. Paul Smith, Mr. Christopher James Anthony Ross. Now when they're directors, it means that they're on the take from those clubs if they're still active there. Nobody's allowed to know, unless you pay for it, how much they get. Mr. Ian Robert McGeechan, Mark Andrew Pepper, Graham Hurst. Wait for it, you'll get some other famous rugby names as we get further down the list. Combined Nominees, Combined Secretarial Services Limited, and you can see that those people have been engaged to launder. That's probably why they go to the distant continents every close season, because the money, as we've said, for David Murray from Rangers, from the Rangers fans' accounts, is now in Dunedin for tax evasion purposes. If you launder it through the ingenious films that we've made, and you should see the propaganda that is in that movie that we're watching on the other channel, it's just astounding. You know, they're deadly serious, as if they were in World War III. The supporters are being bankrupted by them, and all the things that you see at the World Cup with the currency exchange in Brazil, making it that the Brazilian currency was increased in value, so that when the tourists have to buy the currency, they are absolutely rubbed blind. And it was pensioners that were paying for the privilege to see this Lions team pouncing around, pretending that the injury was not premeditated and sulking about it, and all of that. The Carmichael man that got his eyes blackened, the man who replaced Michael, all the time we were in New Zealand, the only Michael Moore in the news was the joker in America that joked about all the issues in politics in America. All of that time, Michael Moore, without any threat from law enforcement, was able to run those 85 P&O companies as Michael Ellis Moore, as he worked his way up the political stream in Westminster, and eventually became the Secretary of State for Scotland. Can you guess who replaced him? Everything that they do, when they bombed the train stations in London, the suicide bombers were shot, they publicised that a year ahead, not the shooting, because that was an accident, a cock-up by them. What they publicised was the fact that there was going to be an event like that in London a full year ahead of time, and the spin doctors from Labour, like Portillo and the quislings at the media, portrayed that in a panorama programme a year ahead. So what you've got here is a Carmichael that gets brutalised in a much earlier tour by the front row in the New Zealand team in the stadium that was replaced by the one that was never ever used because of the act of God in Christchurch when the Trans-Pacific Trade Delegation landed in the town. They were given access to John Key, the millionaire's underground bunker in that city, until things calmed down. When they went to Japan, they had the tsunami. The Trans-Pacific Trade Delegation is about land grabs. This is about stealing from the supporters and the players at the bottom of the game. Right then, and the Secretary of State for Scotland is now a Mr. Podgy Carmichael. Freemason, like the Scottish coach, who does not win a game but gets to be the Freemason because he's got links to Clermont in France and to the Australian cabal in the lodge. That was Bill Beaumont in the suit. Here you see them, hours and hours of practice. The media are absolutely besotted with it. None of them have any time for the fraud or the corruption or the asset stripping of the university sector, where funding is preciously rare, and now the funding is for the dot-com security crisis, where they're surveilling all of their citizens because it has become a twisted and corrupted country because of the crown that is on that badge there. The Crown Templar runs it. The Governor General laughs at the Anzac sacrifice, and the RSA in Dunedin no longer will let me post the truth about the Mr. Bean jokes and the culling of Anzacs at Gallipoli. It's a beautiful place for a junket. Yeah, that's what you're seeing in those images. Let's go back to McGeechan. McGeechan's not an evil man, he's just doing his little bit of fraud. One of my favourite English rugby players, I did not have a lot of favourite English rugby players, was this one, because he was kinda ruthless. Mr. John Hare Winterbottom. He's now a director in a pinstripe suit at Leeds Rugby Club. Amateur retiree. He's the one, I believe, that when they were in the game against France, and it was something to do with, and somebody was falsely accused of something, and I think it was Winterbottom or Mickey Skinner that said, does that mean we can keep kicking them in the head, boss? And that was when Will Carling was involved, and I've been told that Will Carling got death threats because of his social affairs with the royal princess. When you hear what the royals do to the royal princess, none of them get touched by law enforcement. MI6 gave Will Carlin the death threat for the rumours that were circulating about him and Princess Diana. That was someone who's very close to me and my family that told me that, and because of that threat from MI6, that person said, "You're on your own, George, I'm not helping you with your cause. I don't really understand it." And I think he would understand this. He's an intelligent bloke, he's trained and he's played right at the top of the game. But the fear factor is ever so prominent, and the capacity to put the Joker Michael Moore in the American media stream to consume the whole world with comedies and jokes about trivial issues for a decade, when Michael Moore knows that I'm on different continents and that he can get away with pan-continental fraud in the shipping sector, in the cruise line sector, in the casino sector. And then when I come home, they sink a ship called the Costa Concordia, which, when you look at the Greek name for it, it is actually a joke about the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Goodness knows what they were laundering inside of that, and whether or not that was an act of God. But God has a huge sense of humour, and these guys will all eventually be found out. Jim, I hope you get better from the limp. I'm not sure what the limp signifies, but that's Creamy, who lives in Gala but coaches still blessedly the amateur Melrose Colts. Right then, I can't see any other famous rugby names, although there are loads of Davises. That could be any amount of Welsh internationals there. Mr. John Hopkins, Stephen Anthony Ball, Professor Simon Francis Lee. You've always got an academic input here, and no doubt these guys whinge about being short of research funds. Combined Secretarial Services Limited, John Hare Winterbottom again, Stephen John Denton, Mrs. Janet Gissing, Yorkshire Tykes Limited, Gary Hetherington, Ian Robert McGeechan, Brian Oates, Stuart Bidgood, Jonathan Charles Round. Oh, we get into numbered companies. That becomes interesting for the Ponzi shelf issues. IMS 3 Limited, Limited Liability Partnership. If you want to, you can look these up on Wikipedia and see actually what they do. Oh, Corporate Film Investments. That makes the management group look ever so good in the videos that they make, and because the directors are the coaches, they get, you know, a double whammy there. If they make an inspiring speech in the dressing room, or they bang the table and make it look as if someone in their team has performed badly and they're being censored for it, they get paid twice. Or they could maybe get paid thrice because of that global coaches thing that we mentioned earlier on. Angus Galletley, Barry Collingwood Wilson Fairchild, Carl Peter Chambers. Oh, there's a Montague. Not sure whether or not that Montague might be the Duke of Buccleuch or some of his relations. Or some of them might have even been sired on the rugby trips in some of the hotels after the junket is over. But that is a vicious thing of me to say or to suggest. Let's see what we've got. David Kenneth George Farley, David Rodney Fairchild, David Wilby, Hebron, Alloway, Ludlam, Sugarman, another Montague, Jeremy Anthony Montague Alwyn Self, Mr. John Gary Self, Mr. John Philip Walter Harlow. Now the name I could not remember for the England standoff. I remember when Theresa May was brought into the controversies on how she is involved in extraditing people to America and putting them into internment camps there, and she's accusing people of Islamic terror threats and getting them extradited, that they brought a May in onto the wing for England. Now the name of the pair that play at standoff, and the other one, the dad used to be a rugby league player and a rugby league great, are Farrell. They've been introduced because of the whistleblowing of the policeman Farrell. He's exposed the killing of a Metropolitan Police officer, or I think it was a Manchester head of policing, that was killed in a Continental air crash, but that person discovered all of the linkages to the death of that person, but also all of the shady details of the 9/11 terror event, and that person was obligated, that's policeman Farrell, to tell the truth about that. So England then appointed the new standoff, who's the son of the coach. Both of them are Farrells. That's how they work the obfuscation of the truth, and that is why the world is such a fearful place, and that is why they can get away with these massive crimes against the people and their prosperity. Right then, I don't think there's anything else much. Stephen Robinson. Oh, Mr. Todd Blackadder. Yeah, the coach at Edinburgh. The city teams have assets stripped Scottish rugby big time. When I was playing, the city teams won nothing at all. They've taken all the talent from the Borders, from the Highlands, and they've conglomerated them with the RBS label on the jersey in Edinburgh and Glasgow. The only thing they win now are the amateur events and the wooden spoon. Todd Blackadder was the coach at Edinburgh. When we left Dunedin, he was then the coach at Christchurch, which was just about to be the subject of that massive earthquake and all of the thousands of aftershocks that meant that the citizens of the English city in New Zealand had to flee to their homes in the hills on the other side of the country. Many of their businesses closed, and when I talked to the banking people in Dunedin about our residual accounts, they said it was great for Dunedin's business because it was being moved to the Scottish city from the English city. That's a typical statement from a financial services profiteer. Everywhere you go now, there is no escape from them. Mr. Tom David Hassler, Professor David Bartram, Sir Ian Robert McGeechan. We must be getting near the bottom of his list. Oh no, Bespoke UKFS Films Limited. So these are big on talking up the global game, propagandising it, and the film that I've shown you, Inside the Lion's Den, is absolutely typical of that. It is just like listening to I don't know, it's just, we are great and we are paid to talk up our greatness in the dressing room, and if you fail us, we will give you a slanging on air, making the films for ourselves as we reside on the boardroom for this, and we profit from everything that is happening in this profiteering exercise right across on the other side of the world. So that's Bespoke UKFS Films Limited. This is Sir Ian McGeechan, Michael Cleary, Michael Crease, Roland Marshall Owen, Stuart Alfred Quincy, Toby Caton, Lynn Elizabeth Jones, Angela Trudy Ferrugia, Rachel Elizabeth Hobbs, Roscommon Services Limited. Now, if you look at some of those people and their appointments, we mentioned the appointment of one company for one day. That's a laundering commitment, but those ones seem to be relatively innocent. Invotech 2 Limited Liability Partnership. So Invotech, in as in pub. A lot of the money is spent on booze in New Zealand on the tour, and those names are not prominent rugby names as far as I'm aware. Gordon Lewis Brown, Hans Christian Iverson. I know the Iversons are in pharma, but I don't think that that would be connected to Les and his friends, and Les is long retired from pharma, which may not mean that he's out of the profit stream. Paul Anthony Lawrence, Pratap Tyagi, Richard Kevin Watson, Robert Norman Campbell. But company check, the boss is Campbell. And it's the same name. There is no way that anyone can know whether it's the same person as Tony Blair's spin doctor and the man that brutalised Iraq just for the hell of it, so that all of the spin doctors could profit. Simon Philip Dancer, Stephen William Radford, Todd Julian Blackadder. Numbered companies, operating on both companies as a rugby professional. Great big guy. A little scrum half that's lost his teeth already would not dare confront Todd Blackadder eye to eye. I would have to stand on a table to look him in the eye. Yeah, not too successful at Edinburgh. Given the job at Christchurch, the boss at Christchurch was stolen by Australia. A huge fuss was made about that. He was the most successful coach on the globe. Christchurch won almost everything. The pan-continental tournaments they won most years. When the coach left to become the Australian coach, Australia's game diminished and he was sacked just a couple of seasons back. I forget the name of that person. But it is just about asset stripping and talking the game up. And when you hear the game talked up and then you see the performance on the pitch compared to the amateur days and the performance of those really committed doctors, that's JPR Williams and the man who came out of the grandstand at Wasps, they are amateurs, they are gentlemen, they have a future in life and in teaching young children. Potentially, if they retire from rugby far enough back in time, before 1995, without taking any fees from those young children or those young rugby players at all. All of it has changed since Sir Ian McGeechan professionalised the game. Bespoke UKF Films, that's old companies and old directors. Rashomon Services, I can't see any of the legendary launderers, but the number of laundering shelves is climbing. It's less than a two-figure sum, but they are there. Limited liability partnership, you can steal with impunity. Corporate film investments, yeah. Talk it up, make a movie about it, sell it on, merchandise your tour. Every time they go, the jersey is changed. Every time Rangers start a new season, the jersey is changed. Every one of the bankrupted supporters of all of these sporting associations get to pay for the privilege of seeing their game dismembered. Robert Carlyle. Can I see any really big names? Professor David Bartram again, Richard Petty, and I think that is us to the bottom. Okay, so there's these companies, doesn't tell you how many employees, and I've explained that to you. This means that they're director only companies, they're Ponzi schemes, they're shelves. Some of them is just talking up his involvement in the game. His involvement with Leeds is ancient, and I don't know whether or not he's still live there. You can have a look for yourself. Go to Company Check, hit Ian McGeechan, and you can look for it for yourself. Have a look at the board composition at your professional rugby club and see whether or not you can afford to see how much they take from the game as a salary as you plough it in through the turnstiles and for your annual subscription. It's happened within one generation. The people that are in the media now, the people that are in the consultancy services, have described how when you turn your attention on the cabals, and we've mentioned with UK PLC or whatever it was, with Princess Anne and Reading University, that they take you right into the monarchy, right into the palace, and right into the mother-in-law of the woman that was married to Mike Tyndall because of the Tyndall airbase cover-up. And I've explained now how the standoff and the rugby league man and Johnny May on the wing are brought in within days of the news breaking. They have to find somebody that can obfuscate the horrible truth about financial services fraud and about the crimes in the government sector. That's local, national and international, and it takes you into war crimes. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and let me just remind you of how many companies Geach has. It's the same with Jeff Boycott. Jeff Boycott runs Ponzi schemes. Michael Parkinson is a cricket fan. He runs Ponzi schemes in the life cover service. We've made videos on that, and when I posted it on some of my Facebook friends who used to play rugby with me, they said to me, George, you're talking about things I don't understand, and Facebook is about entertainment for the people. He does not know that it is a surveillance tool for all people globally, nor does he know that the Ponzi schemes I was describing, what they are. He sells pensions and investment opportunities to his customers, and he does not know what a Ponzi scheme is and what the damage is of running hundreds of Ponzi shelves or dozens of Ponzi shelves in Michael Parkinson's case, in selling off life cover to the innocent victims of the frauds. That's a chartered accountant in a chartered accountancy firm. I will not tell you the name of the person or the company or the location of those incidents, because Facebook is a globalized thing. But when you see the naivety that allows these crimes to happen right under the nose of the people, and I know that the rugby players and their families are just like my family. My family, when my dad played, he could not afford shin pads. He played in the front row. He used to put Commandos comics down his socks. And he's come out of the game ever so happy with his input to it, and he has bankrupted nobody. They still had 5 teams when he packed up, and that is how it could be were it not for the greed. I know that the committees just think they're doing the right thing, but even the changes in the laws to get those 7 or 8 substitutes wasting their Saturday afternoon as the other ones pine for the bus that they could not afford, it is pathetic. And it is pre-planned. They're doing it in the abattoirs, they're doing it. The man with the clipboard dismembers society, and the referees get to have junkets all around the globe. And the one with a little bit that looks like bird shit on his head managed to do it out of the Republic of South Africa for several decades as the chief referee on the globe. That was the people that globalised the game. It is a huge junket for them, and one of them in New Zealand was on rehab because the junkets were associated with so much alcohol intake. He's now back in the game, but he will be gagged if he begins to talk about how much the game is losing because of the money going right to the top. Let me show you some of the propaganda on their films again. I'm not sure where we're at on the... There we are. Committee rooms, all the best IT to present your game plan. They've got kicking coaches, they've got massage coaches, they've got everybody. Now in the game, you're not allowed to dig a hole for the ball, you have to put it on a plastic tee. This is the junket. Now they're off to the golf course, they're off to Fiordland. There's the folks spending their £13,000. It's great. But if the money were issued to democracy, so that the public sector employees that work for the council in the borders, where these clubs get robbed by the city clubs, there only are 2 provincial sides in Scotland now, Edinburgh and Glasgow. They were contenders to be at the bottom of the league when the south of Scotland won it almost every year. Highlands were respectable, the game was affordable right across the country, and he was losing in the England team that was the butt of the world's jokes, until Will Carlin came over and made them respectable and made them contenders for the championship. That's the Will Carling that succumbed to the death threats from MI6 that my friend said were too heavy for him to take on and to help me bring the game and the country back to prosperity and decency. He had a go at football profiteering. It is pathetic. Everything is a theft project and the game is the victim. Anyway, I'm going to close there.